Joining, guys. Appreciate it, by the way.
So it's a really neat matchup. There's a lot of variety. It's a ton of fun to watch, in my opinion. I love ZZ. I really love the Link of Best Roll talking about this, though. I mean, we saw. I go back to the example of Scarlet using it in this tournament.
So Xavier D had a question for IdrA, and then we'll piggyback back to Incontrol as well. He wanted to know if you had any intentions of going to Korea anytime soon. So Greg, would you ever take another flight back to Korea? Maybe set up shop.
Greg is currently standing and plugging things in. He's looking dapper. You're gonna have to repeat the question, I think.
Okay, that's no problem.
I think he can hear you now.
So Xavier D wanted to know if you ever had any plans on spending an extended period of time in Korea, Greg. So Jeff, how about you? Would you spend any time in Korea?
Yeah, Greg's headset's not working or something, so I guess he'll have to figure that out. But
let's just move on to you.
Yeah, okay. For me, Korea is obviously kind of the mecca of StarCraft 2 and StarCraft in general, so there's no trip plan. I know that was something that was talked about in the past. It was no mystery that I had talked about potentially casting for GOM for a month and spending some time with Artosis and training over there, but it didn't work out because I had duties here, including like the Masters Cup, but also just kind of the day-to-day stuff and the travel that's kind of due here. So we have a couple more Master Cups planned, but if there was ever a month or two open to that kind of a thing, that would be one of my first priorities. There's no escaping the fact that it's one of the best places to train, but it's also just a pretty amazing, country and experience and everything. I mean, Artosis and Nick are, well, I guess it's not fair to say that. It's more like Artosis and Tasteless are two of my best buds, and seeing our Korean division over there as well would be hugely beneficial. So the short answer is no plans. The long answer is hopefully someday.
Okay, fantastic. Just a little update on Greg. He's having a little bit of technical issues. It is often surprising how professional video game players...
Fixed it.
Okay, sick, man, sick. So Greg, your thoughts on maybe spending a little more time in Korea?
In theory, I want to. That feels like the place where you get the best practice. I really like living there as well. A bunch of friends out there. But I don't seem to do as well as I would expect while I'm over there. And really a lot of foreigners have gone over and just not improved that much, or if anything, gotten worse. Part of that is just the style of the Korean ladder. Everyone is so aggressive and so good at that aggression. It kind of scares you out of taking a lot of risks, especially as a Zerg player. And so while you may become more skilled overall just because it is a higher level of play, it kind of hurts you when it comes to tournaments. And I'm not sure if that's what happened the last time I was there, because the last time I spent 3 months in Korea, I did almost nothing for me performance-wise. But I was also just coming out of spending way too much time on the road for tournaments, so I don't know, I just kind of have to think about what's best for me. But Korea itself, I definitely would like to go there, and it feels like practice should be really good there.
Okay, now in the middle of your answer, Sushi asked, with MLG Raleigh right around the corner, and you guys practicing as much as you do for it, how do you guys feel going to MLG Raleigh? And then Greg, how do you feel going to WCS Continental Championships?
It's interesting because going into Anaheim, I felt like I was playing my best StarCraft. I was really, really confident. I felt good. It was the second MLG of the year, so there's kind of a clean slate feel to it. I wasn't really feeling the pressure of my poor performances last year. I felt like I could kind of start anew. But that was probably my worst tournament. I think certainly the worst pairing of tournaments for me ever. And I've said this in a few interviews, but I don't really have any kind of epic excuse. There's no death in the family or huge mind-consuming issue that distracted me or something like that. So going into Raleigh, I'm going to continue to prepare as I have, probably more customs, which, I've said a few times, and I think that's something that I have been doing a little bit more with. I've expanded my training list of players, I guess, outside of EG, and I'll continue to do that. But I don't know. I'm going to focus on the mental preparation a lot, and I don't know, man. Like, I guess I feel the pressure because I really want to do really well, but I did really poorly at Anaheim, so I have kind of my own self-imposed pressure on that. So it'll be interesting for me.
As for me going into Raleigh, I don't know, I feel like I'm playing better. I'm still not happy with how I'm playing. I don't know if I ever really have been. You can always get better. So hopefully it goes well. MLG is such a tough tournament now. It's actually kind of depressing because, well, not depressing, but it's discouraging as a competitor because even if you're one of the best players in the world, even if you're Donregu or MVP or whatever, going into a tournament like that, you can't really honestly expect to win it just because there are so many other good players. You can't pick a favorite for something like that. And I don't know, that kind of bothers me because no matter how good I'm playing, I'd much rather go into a tournament feeling like I'm the massive favorite. I like that. Makes me much more confident, makes me play better. But on the other hand, WCS NA kind of plays into that. It's one of the tournaments where you can feel like you're a massive favorite just because the overall level of play isn't that high. And I feel like I'm playing well enough to win that, so I'm really looking forward to that. And then with MLG, it's just it's the same as always. You try and do your best.
Someone asked, and I'm so sorry because I missed the name with the chat scrolling so fast, that we are on the last days of what is going to be big competitive Brood War. Pro League is switching to exclusively Starcraft 2. In October, we're doing a Starcraft 2 OSL, and I know you guys have mentioned in the past that Starcraft 2 is certainly your main focus right now, and I mean you barely put in the time to catch up on OSL games. Like we're on the last leg of the last Brood War OSL. But do you still have like a soft spot in your heart for Brood War? Are you sad to see it go? Is it like stop talking to an old friend kind of thing?
It's interesting. I almost feel not guilty, I guess, but strangely okay with the demise of Brood War. And I guess the way I would word this is, Brood War is how I spent the majority of my childhood. It's where I forged a lot of the friendships that are still really important to me right now. Like Greg and I, we were good friends in Brood War, and obviously that's carried on to now. It was what has carried me to events around the world. I went to Mexico, I went to Korea. Evil Geniuses sent me to New York for one of the first times I'd been over there, and just kind of the excitement of training for a tournament and then going somewhere. Those feelings came from Brood War, so I certainly feel. I don't know. Like all that being said, I'm okay with it dying just because StarCraft 2 is so incredibly now and it's the future. Like there's no question about it going back to Brood War or Brood War being the game of choice right now. All the money's in StarCraft 2, all the futures in StarCraft 2. This is where the new players are, this is where the leagues are. So it's very easy for me to kind of come to grips with that reality. But certainly, I think, if anything, I would just say that I have a lot of respect for Brood War, and I'll always appreciate what it's done for me.
Yeah, Brood War was just such a massive part of our and my lives back then. It's the reason I went off to Korea when I was 18. It was pretty much all I did even before I went to Korea, and then literally all I did while I was in Korea. That's like a good 4-year chunk of my life. I didn't play it for nearly as long as Jeff, but still, that was pretty all-consuming. And kind of similarly, I'm okay with it being done. I think it was going to have to end at some point, just the way esports works. There's always new games coming out, there's new titles, and Korea, if anything could do it, Korea was one that could make it an actual sport where Brood War just persists, but obviously it didn't have a big enough following there. Blizzard is too big, is able to push it under. And so it's good that it's ending and they're not going to keep dragging it out and having players switch between the two games, because that's just decreasing level of gameplay. It's kind of disrespectful to the legacy of Brood War, in my opinion. So, if we could have had the StarCraft 2 scene, if we could have this much money, this much tournaments, this much international play, and just bring everyone together under the umbrella of Brood War, then that would have been my ideal. I do still like that game better. I feel it was a better competitive game. But it's just, this was inevitable, and it's good that it's happening relatively cleanly. It could have actually been much cleaner, but just let it be done and let that be part of the past. A really cool part of the past, but part of the past.
Sigurd Schwebs wanted to ask both of you where you guys saw yourself when you finished your careers as pro gamers. It's talked about a lot, and this isn't, you guys. Jeff, you're the oldest on the team, coming in at your 26th birthday is right around the corner, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Sorry, what did you say? I was telling Bryce to shut the fuck up.
Well, someone had a question regarding where you guys saw yourself after pro gaming. Jeff, you're the oldest on the team, coming in at 26 in September, yeah? Or is it 27?
A young 26. A young 26. It'll be 27 in September.
Okay. So both of you, I mean, it's been said that it's impossible to be a pro gamer forever. Where do you guys see yourself after you put down the mice and the keyboards?
I mean, I think the coolest part about this is where a lot of my respect for StarCraft 2 is. It's certainly opened more doors than. I mean, it's also in part just kind of the natural growth of competitive gaming, but also our ages. You don't offer an 18-year-old a hosting gig or probably like a head commentating gig at a major tournament because they just don't have the life experience or the, I guess there's not much more to describe there without getting too offensive to an entire genre or like age group. But for me, there's a nice future in probably commentating and hosting, managing, and just kind of DJ weeding the shit out of this place. The guy's living the dream. He's got his passion. He still has his family. That's the most important thing in the world to him. But the guy travels the world talking about video games, and that's what he does for a living. And I think that's pretty inspirational, and it looks like a pretty good living. So as things kind of pick up and get going and growing, it'll eventually get to a place where my time is too far away from practice, and it's not realistic for me to consider myself a competitive player. And I'll make that full transition. But until then, I'm going to kind of dabble in everything.
As for me, it's kind of similar to Jeff. I've been in the industry for a long time, met a lot of people, I've kind of established myself as a really big name, and that kind of reputation I'll just carry through to whatever else I want to do. People like my commentary a lot. I still don't really feel that that's like supposed to be my calling. I'm not really an entertainer. I don't think I'm a particularly good speaker. So it seems weird, but people really like that, so I have that option if I want to, and I do enjoy talking about the game, so it kind of fits in that regard. And then beyond that, I'm sure I can get into the business side of things, or just pretty much whatever, just given experience and connections, should I choose to do that. And if I go back, if I leave esports and get tired of it, I don't really know what I would do, but I've said before, it feels so exciting and cool and unique to be in on the ground floor, well, not the ground floor, but very early on in a developing industry that seems poised to really take off. It seems like this might be the real thing. The bubble's actually not going to break this time. And so to be in early on in that and actually be a part of that is really, really cool to me. So I would imagine something with esports, but I don't really know what yet.
Fantastic. Thank you both very much. Impact161 wanted to know if you could add one thing to StarCraft 2, what would that be? And just to make it fun, let's make it one thing to the StarCraft 2 community, and then one thing to the game itself, whether it be like a unit, or maybe even like an aspect of a tournament or something.
One thing to add to StarCraft 2? Is that the question?
Yes, sir.
Jesus. I don't know, like one of my biggest gripes was that we couldn't watch replays with our friends. I think that was one of the coolest social aspects, but also one of the most important tools for StarCraft. But they're adding that in Heart of the Swarm, so ask and you shall receive sometimes. As far as adding other things to StarCraft, I don't know. Like I guess I would say I don't really have the confidence that off the top of my head I could fire off something in terms of like a new unit or some kind of balancing thing and feel like it would make a huge, it would be a fair change to the game. So if a genie were to pop out of a frickin' little can and ask me, you have one wish for StarCraft, I'd be like, a better social experience through the interface, which is the most boring frickin' answer possible, but I feel like it's the safest one. So maybe like little avatars next to our names that we could, type with in the chat channels, or I don't know, go back to Brood Wars interface or some shit.
I would say crossover play, like legitimate competitive, low latency, being able to play fairly between continents. I think that's the biggest drawback to StarCraft 2 relative to Brood War. You can't really practice that well with people outside of your continent, which hurts everyone outside of Korea a ton, because Korea is just going to continue to have the better practice environment, continue to accelerate fast.
LAN latency. That's actually Greg and I's answer. We forgot about that.
Well, no, mine is still crossover play, because I think it's hugely limiting to not be able to compete or practice, particularly with Koreans, but then with anyone else outside of our continent. I think that's just the worst thing that Blizzard has done in terms of esports with the game. And then for the community, I don't know. I don't really like the community. I try and stay away from them. But there's obviously really, really good parts of it. Like my fan club is awesome. And I always kind of hope that the negative part of the community is just a really vocal minority. So it's just any way to shut them up and let the cool people talk.
Well, Greg, your opinion's wrong on what your wish would be. Just so you know that.
Nope. I thought about this a lot.
Your wish is incorrect. As far as community change, I guess I could answer that one. I think that one's a little bit more interesting. I don't know. I think one of the pedestals I kind of get on about and talk about in terms of community is it certainly feels like it's too negative. You know, you can read a few threads and it's like, oh God, they're asking for me to be fired and they hate me and they're calling me fat, and I feel bad for like 2 seconds. But then I realize, you know what? They don't do that for everyone. They don't hate on the nobodies. It's pretty simple to look at it and just focus on the negative and think this really sucks. But at the end of the day, EG gets the attention it gets, positive or negative, because people care and they think about us. And I wouldn't have it any other way. So I wouldn't necessarily change that. I think people should be critical of us. I think people should be interested in our comings and goings and in our business, and whether that irritates them or makes them think better things of us. I think both those lines of thought are interesting. So I don't think I would change anything around that. If I could change something about the community, I'd have like 100,000 more sexy women playing this game at a really high level, and they would be posting on forums, and I think they would like be really interested in going to events, and they'd just be like super, super kind and willing to create little nerd babies. I think that would be a really good change for the community. And you know what? Women of the world, if you're listening to this raid call, or if you hear it in the future, I'm throwing out the gauntlet. Yeah, get your sexy butts into this game.
I'm going to ask both of you a strategy question. This is from Overlord AI, because it was kind of curious. I had the privilege of going to the most recent MLG arena and cheering on our boy Puma. And as I was watching Losira's games, I felt like in every single matchup he was doing sort of a dated style, like he was going really heavy Ling, Muta Baneling. I mean, we're talking like not even bothering getting in this infestation pit until 18-20 minutes in the game in ZVTs. And even in ZVPs, it just seemed like it was a little dated, but he was making it work. What did you think of his play, and what do you think about incorporating sort of older styles into your gameplay?
Losira, he always gets by pretty much on strength of his macro and mechanics. He's a really, really fast player in StarCraft 1 mechanics. But yeah, his style just definitely is outdated. Mutaling Baneling has its place in the current metagame, but not the mass muta styles. If that works, it's just brute forcing your way through it. It's just outplaying your opponent or getting an advantage early on. It's not actually an efficient, good style to play. And the same with his ZVP. He's still stuck on Roach Baneling styles and Baneling drops and whatnot. And it wins him a lot of games. He's a really, really good player. He can execute better than a lot of people. But yeah, it's just inarguably, his style is outdated, and it's not really the most efficient way to play. But the other part of the question, it is sometimes good to bring in older styles of play, stuff that has kind of fallen by the wayside, because although they may have strategical or build order counters, those counters then also become less used when the thing they counter is less used. So like right now, 2-hatch Muta isn't the best way to play ZVT. It's really easy to nullify. However, so many Terrans have been playing really greedy or really aggressive in certain ways to try and punish the mass queen and the fast third base styles that 2-hatch Muta then hard counters that. So it's good to mix in. Just keeps Terrans off guard. And it's much more effective than it should be because of the current state of the metagame.
Yeah, I agree with everything Greg said. I would just want to piggyback on that last point and say that having not seen the Losira game, so I don't want to comment too specifically on it, I just think it's interesting that you'll see a lot of the older styles kind of rotate back in because, just like Greg said, the metagame kind of ebbs and flows, and mass metas got countered for a while by Thors being incorporated in their push, and Terrans just, in general, getting better about handling them. So we saw metas kind of fall by the wayside. Then the Queen buff happens, and a lot of Zergs you see are doing like Ling Baneling busts at mid-game. They're just going Ling Infester, which is something that kind of Stefano and even, I'm going to say it, Destiny actually kind of pioneered. But I like seeing how strategies kind of circle around back, and as a Protoss player and getting away from Zerg versus Terran specifically, you start to see a lot of that. I've seen a couple of pretty prominent Protosses doing one gate expand, like one gate forge expand, really weird shit like that. And on paper, it's not necessarily the best opener, but because it's so rarely seen and hasn't been seen for so long, sometimes you'll get really weird reactions from your Zerg opponent. So that's kind of the thought process behind it. And it's certainly not something you can do predictably and do every time, but you're counting on your opponent following the metagame while you're breaking away from it. And that concept's really important to StarCraft 2, and it's really cool in my opinion.
To double back to a point you just made, I thought it was excellent that you noted how off-putting it can be in Protoss vs. Zerg to do one gate expands. I recall Greg playing, an average ladder Protoss player at WCS, and he took a game off him just because the timings are different. When you practice 8 hours a day for 4 weeks and you haven't seen a gateway expand in the entirety of your practice, it's really tough. So that was an excellent point. I've asked you both this in interviews in the past, but I always think it's really good because I guarantee some people haven't heard the answer, and I know that Greg's is funny. X-Ninja on Reddit, we have a Reddit thread in our Starcraft, by the way, guys. X-Ninja wants to know, why did you guys pick your current race?
Originally I was Protoss because I hated TVP in Starcraft 1. I figured it'd be a pretty direct switch over, and I liked the way the Protoss played better. And then after like a couple of weeks, Artosis, back then he was a full-time player too, we were just playing a ton, we came to the conclusion that Zerg was going to be the most mechanically challenging because of creep spread and larva inject and whatnot. We felt that there'd be the highest skill ceiling there for mechanical skill, and that's always been my strong suit. Particularly back then, I was much further ahead in it relative to everyone else than now. And so decided that would be the most beneficial race for me to play. And yeah, that caused me a lot of pain. I hate Artosis.
For me, I picked Zerg and Brood War for aesthetic purposes. I liked bugs, I liked science fiction stuff. They borrow most of their concepts for their units from Warhammer 40,000, so it was pretty easy for me as I'm a big Tyranid fan. But in StarCraft 2, it didn't necessarily make sense for me to play Zerg because I felt, as well as Artosis and IdrA, that Zerg would be the most mechanically challenging. Creep spread and larva inject is two mechanics that are extremely monotonous, and that's why there's a lot of Terran players that play Zerg from Brood War, and that's why Zergs are generally the angriest people in StarCraft 2. It's because they spend more time in a game doing more busy work, only to have it like ruined by a timing or something like that, and then they get really mad because, imagine knocking people's sandcastles over at the beach all day long. That's basically what it's like laddering against Zergs. So I picked Protoss because I thought that they would be the best balance between kind of cerebral gameplay, but then also if you catch your opponent off guard, you'll be able to capitalize the fastest on it. And those, I think, play to my strength. And I miss Zerg. I really like it. I like especially how Zergs become in the modern game, where they're much more swarmy and bug-like, and I feel like they have that Zerg feel to them, because in early StarCraft 2, Zerg very much so did not feel like that. So I do miss Zerg, but I'm very happy with Protoss.
Kyle Lewis from here in our chat says, do high-level players have any fun gaming, or is it all gone, replaced solely by competitive spirit? If the latter, do you think high-level players can benefit at all from having fun with their game?
I know Jeff's answer is very opposite of mine, so I won't say that all gamers don't have fun with it anymore, or are just in it for the competition. But for me personally, I don't really like StarCraft 2. I don't think it's a very well-designed game. It's really frustrating to play, and I mainly just do it for the competition. I enjoy Brood War a lot more.
Yep, as predicted, my response is quite different. I don't necessarily disagree with Greg. I think there are a lot of problems with it competitively, and I think, especially having been a Brood War player, that we definitely are playing a game that has a ways to go before it's comparable in that regard to Brood War. But I guess I have an optimistic outlook and faith in the fact that it is getting better. You know, if you go back to the beginning of StarCraft 2, a lot of us were very down on it and very frustrated with how basic the game was, and the level of gameplay was a lot lower. But over the course of 2 years, it's gotten a lot better. And this is this is before our first expansion as well. So I'm very excited for the future, and I think it'll be great. But as far as the day-to-day goes, I have a lot of fun with like almost every element of StarCraft 2, but in particular, the work part. We did the EG training sessions, and with just a few sessions with the Muslim kind of going over, hey, here's what you got to do differently. Most importantly, pointing out that I didn't build enough probes, which, as basic as that sounds, it was something that just was, for whatever reason, in kind of the blind spot of my gameplay. My skill escalated a lot, and little things like that there's tons of them out there for me to still find and kind of hammer into my gameplay. So that nebulous chasing of the top tier competition in StarCraft 2 is really fun for me. I'm nowhere near it, but the pursuit is all the excitement, so I find it really fun.
I'm going to ask a question because I'm curious. If you guys had to pick one game that you would describe as your favorite, not a game you've played necessarily, but maybe a game you've seen on GSL, MLG, and ASL, what game in the last month and a half do you think is your favorite StarCraft 2 game?
I'd say, I'm not sure if it's within that time frame, I think it is, but it was like Symbol vs. Parting, the 2 games he won with the Ultra Banling stuff, because it gave me a brief moment of hope that CVP late game wouldn't have to be Turtle Broodlord infested. Those hopes were quickly dashed as I tried to play that style, but as I was watching those games, I was very, very excited.
I'm actually really bad with names, but I've had the opportunity to cast and just kind of be a part of a lot of these games recently. Or not games, but tournaments rather. And there's a couple really epic games, but I think the one that kind of I don't know. This is kind of a weird thing to say, but it's for reasons outside the game. But my favorite game of recent history was when Thorzane won DreamHack Stockholm, because I knew where it was going. I was supposed to be on top of that. We called it the penis head stage because it looked like the head of a wiener out in the audience. But I was supposed to hop up on that thing as we kind of knew that the series was coming to an end. And it was very clear that Thorzane was dominating Polt and was going to win this thing. When he won, there was an explosion of excitement and energy, and everyone was so happy. And Thorzane himself was on the verge of tears. He was just kind of beside himself with how important that win was for him, to win in front of his hometown crowd and to beat a top-tier Korean at the end of a major tournament. That's something that a lot of people dream to do and very few actually ever accomplish. And to be that close to it, to see the real-time reactions of everyone involved, I feel like I had absolutely, bar none, the best seat in the house to see what that looks like. And it's what makes me think that StarCraft 2 has something really special going on, but also gaming right now. It used to be that people would win and the 10 people in the room would clap their hands in like a golf clap ceremony. But now there's fucking music and jib cameras flying around and some guy yelling King of the North like an idiot, and it's great.
Drainedin wants to know which team, excluding our own, do you guys think is the strongest in the scene? Feel free to do. Let's make it interesting. Let's do North America, Europe, Korea, and then in North America exclude EG. Thanks, Drainedin.
It's kind of hard right now. There's no purely NA teams like Complexity and EG are traditionally two of the big multi-gaming NA teams, but Complexity is almost purely Korean now, and EG is discounted. I don't even know who would be vying for that title, who is actually mostly North American. And for Europe, it was clearly Mouse Sports, but they've lost a lot of players recently, to the extent that they can't even field a full lineup right now, to my knowledge. And then beyond that, I guess Empire. Empire is probably up there in Europe, maybe the best. They have a lot of good players, although one of them is Violet. He's not really. Just teams are too multinational to really split it up that clearly by continent. And then in Korea, I would say Slayers. They've been having problems. MMA and Crank getting demoted. No inside info on that, but just, they're demoted. That really, really hurts the strength of the team. But even beyond that, with Coca and Puzzle really stepping up, and MMA is still on the beach, I imagine he'll be back to the A team soon. I think Slayers would probably still be the strongest in Korea. LGIM on paper is incredibly powerful. However, Nessie and MVP tend to underperform in anything that's not GSL. So I always hesitate giving them much of a nod in team stuff.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think it's almost impossible to call a team a purely North American team, because even if you consider EG, like our strongest players, Puma, obviously Korea, Thorazane, Europe, that kind of stuff. So it's pretty hard to do that. So I guess just outside of EG, teams that really impressed me is like a team like Team Liquid. I really think Tej is playing the best Terran right now on the planet. I think Hero is capable of playing the best Protoss on the planet, but it's certainly one of the top 3 to 5 up there. And then obviously Rhett, fantastic. So I really think they're a great team. But even outside that, if you take the actual team concept to heart, it's more than just competitive play. It's how they do business-wise. And Team Liquid is only second to EG, in my opinion, in that regard. They do a great job releasing content and getting attention for their guys and making them important and representative, even when perhaps they're not playing as well as they normally do. After that, like Greg said, Empire is one of the better European teams. I used to say Maus, and I think Protosser has a lot of potential there, but losing Morrow and obviously Thorzingo and EGs, those are huge hits. They still have Nana and House Ops, who I think are 2 of the best, and I think Protosser has the opportunity to, but it's hard to look at a 4-man roster and consider them one of the best teams, because I think you just need more. And then in Korea, I mean, we got the finals coming up. It's going to be really interesting. FXO's kind of had a Cinderella story of a lifetime, and Slayers is back in that final stage where they've been 2 other times. So I think you have to hand it to them. But next month it could be LGIM, and the month after that it could be Startail, and who knows? Because the Korean scene's so changing and consistently proven to be a hard count in that regard. But those are some of the teams I'd think about.
A gentleman named Chris wanted to know, what do you think happens to the disparity between foreign skill and Korean skill when Heart of the Swarm comes out? I mean, for example, when when we all started playing the Wrath beta, it was much closer. Do you think now that we have people that understand the mechanics, for the most part, we have people that are getting their mechanics to the best it can be done now? Do you think that Heart of the Swarm really acts like a reset, or do you think that Korea is still prone to just take off running more so than the foreign community when the expansion comes out?
I think it'll definitely close the skill gap a little bit, just because the big advantage Koreans have is they have so many man-hours going into figuring out the game, and a lot of that information is shared amongst all of them. Whenever any player figures something out, it spreads very quickly through the scene, and non-Koreans just aren't as united. We don't work as hard. We don't find things out as quickly. So that kind of holds us back a bit, but that will all be reset as they won't have had the time put into figuring stuff out with the release of Heart of the Swarm. So it'll do that. And also things will be less understood in general, so there'll be more randomness. And so just, percentage-wise, we'll win more games, even if we shouldn't, even if we're not the better players. So for a little while, it will definitely close the gap. I think Koreans will still be more successful on the whole, though. It'll just be much more similar to early on in Wings of Liberty, where Koreans were the more successful players on the whole. They were the better players, but plenty of foreigners could compete with them and beat them in tournaments.
Yep. I mean, I don't really have anything too much more to add to that. Just while the game is kind of in an innovative state, foreigners benefit more from that. And as the game becomes more mechanical, it gets more difficult. I will say this, I think the new units in Heart of the Swarm add more mechanical difficulty, especially Protoss and Zerg. In my initial, I don't know, from what I've checked out so far, Terran seems to have gotten simpler in Heart of the Swarm, whereas Zerg and Protoss became more complex with spellcaster units that require much more multitask and thus APM. So I'm excited about that, because I think Heart of the Swarm, the game's going to get more difficult, and I think that's a good thing for the pro gaming scene.
Oversized Pillow from Reddit wants to know, what do you guys think about the current skill level of the Kespa players, and do you think that we'll be seeing them in a sort of more real competitive level here in the next 6 months?
Well, if you've been watching the WCS Korea Kespa cross match thing, it's become very apparent that they've closed the gap a lot. I mean, there's a few players that are really impressing. Obviously, Snow as a Terran player was doing great. the usual suspects. I think Flash is looking to be pretty strong. Jaedong's done really well for himself, but I don't know. I'm really impressed. What I like is that this is the more realistic time frame. People were like, "Oh no, Jaedong switches to StarCraft 2, and a week later he's the champion." But it's not like that. It's going to take time, and obviously they're amazing talents, but it's not such a simple game that within a very short distance they can transition and become the best. But even so, Flash, Jaedong, and Beast has actually been, I think, in my opinion, the least impressive of the three biggest names. But like Jangbi played really well as well. So I mean, we're seeing little sparks and hopes, and they're competing with the StarCraft 2 programmers that have been playing since the beginning. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, we saw, I think 2 people made it through. I think Reality and Sulky made it through the qualifiers. I don't know, honestly, I expected them to be doing better faster, because they've been playing for longer than the public knows about. Like, they didn't admit they were practicing, but they were. And you see some of them hint about that in interviews. They've been playing for quite a while. They knew this was the future. They still had to play Brood War, but they played StarCraft 2 on the side. No one knows exactly how much they've practiced, but just I consider them on the whole the more talented players. And I know they have been practicing for quite a while, so I figured they would actually be doing better than they are. But as Jeff said, you can see constant progress, and the progress is accelerating as I think they're just not playing Brood War at all anymore, given that the total switchover is so soon. And you see the super talented players, the players like Flash, Sulky, Effort, not going to name any more names, but the really talented guys, the ones who do have a spark for RTS, they're not pure practice robots. They're already, they're showing us things we haven't seen before, smart things that should be incorporated in everyone's play. The mechanics are obviously still there. They're incredibly fast. Flash's macro and some of those TVPs was pretty ridiculous. And things are just starting to click for them. I thought they'd be a little bit further along, but you can see that they're getting into it, and they'll be just as good as the GSL players pretty soon.
A gentleman, I believe, who went by the name of Sick, wanted to know what you guys have thought of the WCS thus far, and whether or not it has replaced WCG in your eyes here in StarCraft 2. And I want to slap on sort of a second question to that. Besides Korea, what nations do you think are going to do best at the WCS Grand Finals?
Well, I'm going to steal Greg's words for a little bit and then let him probably expound upon it. But I think WCS is fantastic, but I don't like that there's been a few events running WCS alongside it. I think it's an important enough and big enough tournament with a big enough prize pool that you can run that separately, and to, I don't know, kind of steal the attention away from it, but then also put the players in a really stressful situation where they have to play 2 tournaments at one time is overall bad. But overall, I'm really excited at the idea that Blizzard is sponsoring and putting money into StarCraft 2 and helping foster and grow the competitive scene. And I've always liked the idea of nationals funneling down to few representatives going into an international competition. Sure, there's a few guys there probably that are not as good as some of the others, and of course all eyes will be on the Koreans, but there's something special to be said for representing your country in a major tournament.
I think it's excellent, short of the fact that they are combining some of the qualifiers with other events. As Jeff said, in the Canadian one, you just you think of Canadian players, you think of Huck. But then he had to go play his losers bracket match literally 10-15 minutes after getting beat by Alicia up on stage, and he lost because of that. There's no doubt about that. TT1's a good player. You could lose to him, but you can't play properly in that mental state. And the same thing happened to both me and Jeff in the American qualifier down in Anaheim. That should not be happening. This is a gigantic tournament. Blizzard's putting ridiculous amounts of money and organizational time into it. They're doing a really, really good job of all that. So to then, on that, just tack on some of your tournaments to other events where they get less exposure, and it really, really frustrates and hurts the players, that is a bad thing to do. But on the whole, it's just absolutely amazing. It's far surpassed what WCG was last year. WCG will always have sentimental value to us as Brood War players just because it was all we got to do competitively for years. It was literally the only thing that foreigners had to look forward to every year. So just everything went into that, and it was a really, really big deal to us. But in terms of pure quality of the tournament and how well it functions as an Olympics of gaming, WCS has already far surpassed that. And we haven't even seen how big the international event's going to be yet.
And to wrap that question up, if you had to do, let's do top 3 countries in terms of performance, excluding Korea at WCS finals.
I'd say Sweden and Germany and I don't know who the third for that would be. I'll say USA because I'm in qualifying minute.
I don't know. Scarlet really impressed me from Canada. Ostagy's a strong Zerg as well. But continentally, they have to go and do the North American one, so it's kind of a question of who's going to make it out of there. I definitely agree with Sweden. Naniwa, Sase, Thorazan, it's pretty hard to get past that, but they have some big up-and-comers like Sort of, Cytoplasm, and others. I think that's going to be an amazing qualifier, so I don't know. Sen qualified from Taiwan, and China/Taiwan's been really, really quiet. Not quite sure how good those guys are and if they've grown or not, but...
To double back before moving on, I talked to Artosis at MLG about what he thought about the Chinese players, and he says that he thinks Tudming is like a low, like a Code A quality player. So that's really exciting. And I also got the opportunity to stand behind Sort of and Cytoplasm, and I think you can tell so much about a player when you actually stand behind them and watch them play, and they're both extremely talented. And I'm looking forward to watching their games. Ben McGinnis wants to know, are you guys open to the idea of switching races in HOTS? I presume you have to be off racing just a little bit to try and figure out everything that's going to be going on. So let's make this an overall philosophy going into the expansion. How do you think you're going to prepare for this switch?
I'm going into it expecting to be a Zerg player. I like the Viper. I'm not so sure about the Stormhost anymore. It looks like it's supposed to serve a function that Zerg really needed. I'm not sure how good it's going to be at it, though. But I kind of like what they've done with Zerg. Unless something is terribly, horribly weird or wrong or feels bad, I don't see myself switching races. I think it would be really difficult to do, even with the kind of strategical reset that's going to come with the new game. There's still a lot of knowledge and stuff that's going to carry over from races, plus the comfort with the mechanics. And it would take a long time to build that up, even with that one kind of starting fresh. So I expect to be a Zerg player.
I would think that's the answer that 99% of pro gamers would give, because, think about how much time you spend with your main race. It's, I'm not going to do the stupid math in front of you, but it's just a ridiculous amount of time. And even the guys that off-race quite a bit, like the Muslim plays a lot of Zerg, he's still in the fraction of 1% games played of Zerg versus Terran. So in just raw man hours and a question of how much you practice, it just mathematically doesn't make sense to switch with a game that's going to have, like Greg said, kind of a strategical reset, but not so much so that the entire race is reinvented. It's no mystery that obviously a couple of big changes are coming, but not so big that the race is now obsolete and you're relearning everything.
ERW wants to know, if you could change one thing about each race in StarCraft 2, what would it be? I understand that could be it's a very big question to ask, but try your best.
I think Protoss needs the most redesign in order to make it fun and competitive. Force fields are too powerful and Vortex is too powerful, but they have to be that powerful, otherwise Protoss would just never win. They need that to compensate for other weaknesses they have as a race, but that creates really terrible gameplay where if anyone's trying any aggression, everything comes down to how well the Protoss hits their force fields. If they hit them well, they win. If they don't, they lose. And then the Mothership versus Broodlord dynamic, obviously everyone just despises that. It's terrible. Broodlords are too powerful against everything else, and then everything comes down to the Vortex, which is really boring and badly designed. As for Terran, I think Terran's pretty well designed. Well, actually, no, there are problems with Terran. Their mid-tier is really, really good. It's almost like it should count as a 2.5 tier because it's so much more efficient than the other races mid-games. But then their late game is kind of hard to get into and not particularly good. That can be okay. However, it's hard to balance because you're balancing things that are designed to be different strengths, but you're balancing them to use against each other because it's too hard for Terran to get to their third tier. I don't know. Honestly, Blizzard just kind of fucked everything up beyond belief, and they just kind of have to patch everything together, and I have no idea what the best way to do it is.
Gosh, these kind of questions are so hard because I actually don't sit around thinking all day, what does a race need change? Because my mindset's very much so counter that, I suppose, because it doesn't make sense because I'm not a part of the balancing team. So if I sit around wishing for things, It seems like a wasted effort, but in the spirit of the question, I would make the Ghost cost 100 minerals and 200 gas, and I would give it like a 50% revert on the nerf to snipe. So I think that they should re-enter the game and cost more gas than minerals, as you oftentimes see Terrans with very low minerals but high gas. Protoss, I don't know. I would allow Colossus to have 6 legs and 4 lasers and fly, and then I think they should also have the blink ability and shoot air. And with Zerg, I don't know. I'm kind of a fan of the Ultralisk still needing some touching up. I think it's awesome as it is. It's definitely gotten better in the metagame, but it still doesn't feel like the Brood War Ultralisk, which was really... It felt like more of a battering ram. It was kind of quick. They were really hard to kill in a lot of scenarios because their upgrades made them really cool, but in the current game, all the armies have such high DPS that I've seen... I just think it looks ridiculous when like 3 Marauders just destroy an Ultralisk. I think that looks really dumb. That kind of gets to Greg's point, like there's so much to fix that there's not much you can say, but that looks so stupid when a Terran's microing the shit out of individual Marauders and an Ultralisk just bursts into gore on the field. It just doesn't look right at all.
A gentleman in our Raidcall chat wanted to know, and I'm sorry with the question scrolling so fast, I didn't manage to catch his name because I was writing down a question. He wants to know, what is your ideal tournament to compete in? He wants to know format, amount of time played per day. Is it an open bracket? Is it a group? Are there invites? Devin, there we go. So good. So anyway, ideal tournament. Go.
I would say it should be pretty, like, lots of online qualifiers. Make sure everyone, if you're good, you should be able to get into it. And then 2 group stages, top 2 advanced for each group stage or whatever. This group stage is round robin, at least best of 3. And then that funnels into an 8-man single event bracket with probably best of 5s and then best of 7 finals. I'd say that's the best, fairest, and also most entertaining format for a tournament. So that, and then as for playtime for a day, I don't know, like 6 to 8 hours. I'm not sure what other facets would really be involved. Like, obviously there has to be a good up-to-date map pool. There should be a reasonably diverse group of players, like international. It shouldn't be just Koreans. Although it would be kind of fun to have one that's purely merit-based, but it's not particularly entertaining for viewers or to play. Yeah, I'm not sure what else would be included in that response.
I'm shitty with numbers, so I'm just going to say that everything Greg said is correct, and I would follow that format-wise. But I guess my much more bland answer is the GSL. I really like the idea of practicing for a single opponent for at least a week or so, playing on the biggest stage where the most people are watching, with the best commentators commentating, in a booth in front of a live audience. And I think the only thing I would do is I'd make them all best of 5s. I feel like best of 3 is still pretty volatile, which some people like, a lot of people like, that like a worser player can cheese out a better player or something like that. But I think a cool best of 5 between some of the best players on the planet with the best stage and all that good stuff would be the best. The best.
We're going to go a little off topic here and explore something outside the realm of StarCraft 2, but I just thought this question was so damn cool. A guy named Matt wanted to know, what was your favorite era of war, considering tactics and technology available? So we're talking World War II, Civil War, medieval times. That's sick. That's a good one.
I actually almost got a minor in history in college, but I'm such a shitty student that I was like 75% done with that, and I think I got distracted and ended up getting 25 extra credits in English, which don't actually do anything for you. It's a long story of bad. But I studied a lot of the World War II era, particularly the historian Ambrose. I think he's a fantastic novelist, but also he has insane knowledge on that era. So if you guys have ever heard of Ambrose, you should check him out. And I like that a lot, but actually I think my favorite would be kind of Roman/Greek era warfare. Times when like a single general could actually just win you the planet, and really cool, innovative tactics were coming out. The whole Spartan training regiment was insane and just really cool to read about. The fact that people actually did that shit is just crazy cool. So I'd have to go with Roman/Greek.
My dad was a big military history buff, particularly World War II era, so I grew up like watching those movies and reading some books about it and stuff. So I guess that it's not a huge area of interest for me. It's not something I've looked into a ton. I'm more interested in like culture and culture and stuff like that when I look at history more so than military. But yeah, World War II is interesting, I guess.
Cody, I can't tell if you died or not.
He died and
yes.
still held down the push to talk.
That's how committed I am to this team, man. A little late, wanted to know if you ever saw any other RTS games taking the #1 spot, dethroning Starcraft 2, and
No.
if that were the case, oh shit. Let's say hypothetically one did. Would you consider switching?
Okay. In this hypothetical future where there's somehow a better RTS, it would absolutely depend on the atmosphere. Like if EG gets a team for that, I mean, I'm not going to quit my job, leave my house, and be like, Anna, they've made this other game that's better. We must go, and then just hit the road to go home and buy a computer and play this other game. There's so much that goes into a game, like the community, the company's support, public interest. Like, there's some pretty cool games out there. That fucking, what is it, Tribes game? That's a pretty cool game. No community. Nobody really plays it. There's like 17 guys somewhere logging on every night trying to play with each other, and eventually that's going to get old and it's going to die. That's probably what's going to happen, unless people can pick it up and raise it up and it can grow. But that's such a scary place to be. That's terrifying. Whereas StarCraft has history. It's got lineage. It's got tradition. There's people that I played with or knew 10 years ago when they were 18. Now they're 28-year-olds, owners of companies and shit. Like, this game's not going anywhere. So, man, that game would have to be fucking amazing. But if it's not, then I don't know. It's never going to happen.
Yeah, if something did become the go-to RTS esport, if it somehow moved the community over, if it was a quality game, if it was just it had everything that was necessary and became the go-to RTS esport, then I would have no problem switching. Like I said before, I kind of only do this because it's what I do. It's my job. It's what has become of Brood War. Brood War was the game that I played like as a purist, and so I've already kind of sold out. So I have no problem selling out a bit more.
Well, there we go. Someone asked this moons ago, and Jeff's previous answer reminded me of the question. I thought it was really good. Outside the Evil Geniuses team, who are your best friends amongst professional StarCraft 2 players, and then who are your practice partners outside of Evil Geniuses? I mean, I know we all sort of have a soft spot in our heart for Nick, but I was wondering, who's your best non-Evil Geniuses friends?
I think mine would have.
Go ahead, Greg.
I think mine would have to be Rhett Yost. He's actually the guy who kind of discovered me as a competitive player back in Brood War. I was already reasonably good, but he then, just through a friend, I ended up playing him a bunch of games one day, and he decided I was good enough that I could then join his team, which was it was TMG, if anyone remembers it. It was theoretically a sponsored team, one of those teams that promised to pay you and then didn't. But that was kind of the start of me being known in StarCraft 1, and I've known him and been good friends and practice partners with him since back then. And as for practice partners, it's kind of hard on NA to find people. I practice with Gosi Terran, Wong, Major, etc. a decent amount. And then outside of that, it's largely ladder games. A few Protosses here and there, but no one super regularly.
I train with Golden, Sleep, and actually, let me just open up my friends list. What else do I play with? Oh, Boyo, sometimes with State. A lot of times practice is just teammates, that kind of stuff, but of course you want to branch out when tournaments are coming up because you're just as likely to hit a teammate as anybody else. So you want to give them too much information. As far as best friends outside of EG, all those people on forums that bitch about the quote-unquote old boys club, those are pretty much all my friends. It's like Tyler, Artosis. I was actually the leader of a team like 10 years ago that Tyler was a part of, Team 88, and those are some of the best freaking times we've ever had. So I actually go way back with him. Good buddies with Artosis. Yost, the same as Greg. Only actually, I think Greg and him were closer longer ago. They've known each other longer. Greg and I are friends with a guy by the name of Skew. He's like an acceptable amount of crazy, so we kind of keep him close, but not too. You wouldn't have him watch your children because you might come back and find them in different kind of body parts around the floor and stuff. Still talk to Axlab. We got a near and dear place for him in our heart. He's a good guy, and we always see him at tournaments and stuff too, so it's kind of cool that way. And then there's some Koreans like Hwani, who's the current manager for Team Fnatic. I met him through Greg in Artosis, and he's actually one of the coolest effing guys there is. And I'm actually friends with a lot of people, so this is kind of like that concern I have with my upcoming wedding, where I don't want to, I can't name actually everybody, but the ones that I don't name, if they ever hear this, they're gonna be kind of butthurt about it. So that sucks. But a lot of people out there, man. I don't know. Sorry to everyone I forget to mention.
Yeah, that's why I kind of only did red, because I figured there's too many to actually remember, and also limited only to players. But if you go outside that and go like entirety of esports, and me and Artosis and Tasteless were like the only 3 foreigners there. Well, Rhett and Noni came and left, but me, Artosis, and Tasteless were the only 3 foreigners in Korea for quite a while towards the end of Brood War and then the start of Starcraft 2. So we spent a ton of time together and we were really close friends.
Yeah, to double back on what everyone what Greg and Jeff said, it's actually much easier to name the 1 or 2 people in the 4 or 5 years you've been working, in StarCraft or esports that you didn't like than it is to name all the people you do like, because everyone's really cool. Wani, Nick, and Dan, everyone's really cool. Greg probably hates more people than most of us, but
yeah, I was about to say, I'm pretty sure that's a book long list for me.
Ari Eugen has been asking quite a few questions. What is your esports moment that you are most proud of? And because it wouldn't be fun if we didn't ask the opposite, what is the moment that you were maybe most disappointed in your esports career?
Happiest singular moment might be it's hard to pick one. Maybe going back to when I beat MVP on Steps of War, just because that's not supposed to happen. He wasn't a GSL winner yet, but they were talking about his 27-0 TBZ streak in practice going into the match, and he was already the best Terran. He just hadn't figured it out yet. And then to beat him on Steps of War after getting double bunker blocked in a GSL match, that was pretty cool. And then there's other ones like any tournament win. It's hard to rank those. I guess IEM China, since I was kind of a comeback from a slump. It was really random. I hadn't been ramping up to it. I just came out of nowhere and kind of won a tournament, so that was awesome. Particularly the 3-0ing at Puma. And then the MLG Orlando run, where I was up on stage for 4 consecutive matches against GSL Koreans and winning all of them except just barely going down to. Yeah, I actually lost 1-2 to MC, and it wasn't that close, but it was winnable. So that was really cool. So there's actually a lot of moments vying for that title for me. I'm not sure which is my absolute favorite. And then as for worst moment, there's quite a few of those. Actually, this recently at Anaheim, kind of what Jeff talked about, I felt I was pretty good going into that. Not completely confident, but I definitely thought I would win WCS USA. I just did not really prepare for the tournament conditions at all. I lost to Daisuke. I had 2 or 3 hours of sleep the night before. I was playing absolutely awful. It was not a player I should lose to. And so then immediately to go over and lose to Axlov and MLG. Nick's a great guy. You practice with him a lot, and it's not a shame to lose to him, but in practice I always did really, really well versus him, to the extent that I'm pretty sure I was in his head, he played worse versus me than anyone else. So to lose that match I shouldn't have in WCS, and then go over and lose to someone who I usually feel very comfortable playing against, and for conditions that were largely outside my control, that was incredibly frustrating, particularly because of how important it would have been to me to win WCS USA.
For me, I don't know. I can't tell if he specified StarCraft 2 or not, but obviously winning the national championship in Brood War was my crowning achievement. It was definitely the highest point in my gaming career. It was just it's the biggest thing I've ever won, but it was the most meaningful. My mom spent every dime she had in the bank to send me there. It was my first major tournament. Just everything about it was pretty fucking magical, except for how I dressed. I dressed like a freaking homeless person the whole time, and everyone took pictures of me, and they still haunt me to this day. But other like really good moments, I'm really happy with NESL Season 1 wins. I was commentating the fucking league, but then I also beat Ensnare, took a game off of July, I had a very close series to him, and won a couple others that were really, really cool. And that was really cool for me. And then similarly, I think my lowest points would be Season 2 of NESL, where I was kind of dealing with that 2011 depression thing, and we had to play 2, but sometimes 3 games in one day. And I was 0-5 in 2 days, basically, because I was just feeling so fucking down on myself, and it went really, really bad. So that was kind of icing on the cake for terrible, terrible times. But outside of that, I would say, interestingly enough, I think my lowest point in StarCraft 2 was when I was commentating for NASL and I restreamed the GSL, and just obviously broke a rule. It's a rule a lot of people break, but I was in the public eye, so it was a really troubling time because I didn't handle it particularly well, and it was something that was really embarrassing and bad. And it was the worst thing I think I've ever done, especially, well, not even especially, it's the worst thing I've ever done. And that sucked, but obviously, made it out of there okay and learned from my mistake.
So we have one last question before we wrap this up, and it's sort of it's one from the Xavier D says it best right here. We just announced that we picked up Conan Liu, Suppy. He was awarded MLG's Breakout Player Award at MLG Anaheim. He's since then qualified for Asus ROG. So if you guys missed that, now you know. And we wanted to know your thoughts on having a new player on the team, especially an up-and-comer, which is something that Evil Geniuses has long been criticized for missing.
Terribly disappointed. I think he's a horrific human being, and he didn't even win a DreamHack, and we only recruit top talent that we can then obviously pay a handsome salary and watch as they, become a worse player. So I don't like that we're recruiting young upcoming players that have a lot of promise, are super positive, and have been around for years, and are just in general really friendly, kind people that work hard and play well and have obligations like CSL. I think it's I don't know. It's just going against our business model. I mean, if raising talent and giving young people opportunities to live their dream and play the StarCraft 2 with the best team in the world, then I guess we'll see how that works. I'm upset. You know what I mean?
Yeah, in that same vein, it's absolutely awesome to have Suppy on board. Actually, I don't know him particularly well, but at Anaheim, I was about to play Tails in MLG, and he had played him previously in the tournament, and he told me pretty much what he does. And he actually saved me from dying to some stupid-ass gateway block cannon rush on Cloud Kingdom, so I have a soft spot for him there. We also played in the recent IEM Cologne qualifiers, and I don't think those games were broadcast, so no one actually got to see it, but we had a couple of really epic long Broodlord-based ZBZs. He's definitely a really good player, and really importantly, he's someone who's gotten a lot better recently. Like, he wasn't a competitive Brood War player, and he hasn't been in tournaments for a particularly long time in StarCraft 2, and he just kind of comes out of nowhere and is the best WCS USA player going through the MLG bracket. He got further than anyone else, despite those terrible playing conditions, so that's really impressive. And yeah, as Jeff kind of said, it's really cool to have kind of an up-and-coming player on board. Everyone here has been around for a long time. It's pretty established. Even the new members, obviously, Thorzane's been around forever, and the Koreans and whatnot. So actually, just having a new player on the team, new talent, new ideas to share, new person to talk to about stuff, particularly for me as a third player, it's really, really cool. Happy to have him on board.
And with that said, we'd like to thank...
Just gonna say for the neckbeards that don't actually get sarcasm, I'm really happy to have him on the team. It dates back a long time to the very first Team Liquid attack, where I was actually the guest of honor, and Suppy was, I think, something stupid like 9 or 10 years old at the time. and maybe 11, but he sounded like a child. He was a child. He was just a very small kid, but he played against me, and I was Proudest as a Zerg player at the time, and I tried to cannon rush him, which a lot of you will get a chuckle out of because it would turn out that 10 years later that's what I do a lot. And he was watching, he was restreaming it, but it was all in good fun, so it's not like he was cheating or anything like that. But then he made a YouTube video making fun of how terrible he destroyed me. So it goes all the way back then as a young kid with no no idea that later he'd be on the same team as me as a pro gamer. And now I'm going to cannon rush the shit out of him, and it's going to work this time, and it's going to be good. It's going to be real good.
So with that said, and with those promises made, we're going to wrap up the first Evil Geniuses Raid Call Q&A session. Please keep your eyes peeled because we'll be doing this in the future, so keep a lookout and follow us at Evil Geniuses on Twitter, and Jeff is EG Incontrol, IdrA is IdrAjit, and if you want to follow me, because I wouldn't mind that at all either, I'm Ghost of Trolling. And Suppy can now be followed at EG Suppy. Again, thank you for your time. Thanks for coming in. I'm sorry that we couldn't get to everybody, but we do appreciate it tremendously. And Evil Genius is fighting. Thanks, guys.